So, being a multilingual YouTuber, one of the most common questions I'm asked is, how do you learn another language? More specifically, a Balkan one. And most commonly, these questions come from people who have Balkan ancestry, most usually parents or grandparents, or sometimes just people whose interest was piqued by my content. And considering there's a lot of misinformation online about the language learning process coming from GigaChad polyglots who speak 18 languages fluently, which they learned under 3 months, and so can you, with a method they learned from the ancient Babylonians from Atlantis, for only the low price of 600 bucks. So I've decided to make this video considering that I've learned a bunch of different languages and am still learning them, and how you can too with very little cost and the methods that are actually effective. So without further ado, let's begin.
Iltam Zumra Rashupti Ilatim.
So first of all, to maximize your language learning potential, you gotta have a talk with yourself and figure out why you really want to learn a language that you want to learn. What's your motivation behind learning it, and what factors are in and out of your control? For some, it might be getting in touch with distant relatives, for others it might be a EU passport, and for others, the joy of listening to Yugoslav war songs. So it is of uttermost importance that you identify why you're learning the language that you are, otherwise you will quickly lose motivation and go back to your sad monolingual life of watching stupid brain rot Hollywood movies and never knowing the joys of watching Naruto in a foreign language.
Clone jutsu multe umbre. Nu asta din nou, este cea mai slabă figură jutsu a mea.
Another thing you must acknowledge at this stage is one big elephant in the room: your age. It's no secret that younger people acquire languages much faster than older folk, and honestly can be quite demotivating to see yourself in the ancient age of 35, seeing some young child easily acquire a completely foreign language while you still struggle to learn that fourth case in German and are fighting the urges not to learn at all. Believe me, been there, done that. Now, contrary to popular belief, this isn't because the adults are dumb and children are more flexible and whatnot. Instead, look at it more as the amount of life experience you've had with your native language and how much of your life you've built it using it. The longer you've been alive, the more you've kind of been accustomed to this system of thinking in your current mother tongue, and the more you are alive, the more your brain is stubborn on leaving that system go and doing a harder task of basically rewiring your brain into a completely foreign style of thinking. However, that's not the end-all be-all. The bad news is, yes, it is easier to start when you're younger. However, there's still good news. Scientists at MIT have discovered that older users can still acquire a foreign language to the same degree as a younger learner can. And what's more, even acquiring a language to a low proficiency can greatly help improve cognitive ability and decrease the risk of developing brain degeneration later in life. Unlike my channel. Despite how it might seem on first glance when trying to teach your grandma how to use an iPhone, the brain does retain its learning capacity throughout its lifetime, and it is entirely possible for the brain to rewire its circuitry and alternate its line of thinking throughout your life. However, anyone that says that this process is quick or easy is trying to get money from you, either via selling you something or harvesting your hard-earned clicks. So, if you're embarking on this journey, be prepared for this path to have a lot of bumps and obstacles that you will have to overcome. But they're not impossible, and with proper motivation and perseverance, you will be able to overcome them eventually. Second, being adult also means having adult responsibilities, such as having to pay the bills, going to work, having hookups, having to pay child support after those hookups. Your free time is more limited than that of a child. So, keep in mind that the time you can and will devote to learning will affect the progress you make. Finally, you can't control your native language. I know, that's... For example, if you're Dutch and you want to learn German, congrats, you're halfway there. Your languages are practically grammatically quite similar and the cultures are also not that far apart. So it's going to be much easier for you to learn German as a Dutchman rather than as an Estonian trying to learn Japanese. So the important thing is don't compare yourself to other language learners, especially ones who are in a different life circumstance regarding from the point where they're starting in. Languages in the same language family will overall be easier for you to learn rather than languages that are on the opposite sides. So don't beat yourself up if you're making less of a progress learning Korean when your native language is English than a Romanian who's learning Italian. It's often said that the hardest language to learn is the one that you don't want to. Hence why it seems odd that half the world had to take French in all 4 years of high school, yet no one can utter a word of French. And to be fair, who would want to be bilingual if your only other option for a language is French?
Je suis chaud. Ouh, je suis très chaud. Ouh, tu es chaude? No?
Nevertheless, just because of this, it is extremely important to have a real reason to wanting to learn a language. If you're just learning a language to get certain credits in college or get a passport, I hate to break it to you, but you most likely won't make it far in your endeavor. The best way to motivate yourself to learn a language is to essentially fall in love with the culture of the language that you're learning. If you're not a huge weeb, then you should look to find books, movies, TV shows, its history, poetry, art, anything and everything you can imagine to fall in love with the culture and care for this language on a deeper level. By incorporating these aspects of a culture in your motivation, you will constantly have something to push yourself to kind of strive and keep going, especially when the learning process gets tough. And if you're learning a language whose inner workings are the complete opposite of your mother tongue, you will need that motivation, even more so than a League of Legends player needs a shower. You're also in control of how hard and how consistently you are studying. Although it might not seem when you're sluggishly going through your 14th case in Hungarian, but hard work and perseverance will always beat raw talent in the language learning process. And you are the one who decides if you're gonna break out the flashcards to learn or watch the Big Bang Theory for the 1000th time. And a lot of that key decision making on whether or not you will break out the cards comes from your motivation. So find that motivation and make it good ASAP. So now that we have all of that out of the way, how should you learn a language as an adult? Well, I can't really dictate as what exactly you should do, as the language learning process deviates so much from person to person, and what works for person A might not work the best for person B. There essentially aren't any shortcuts here. But what I can give you is some advice on some methods that work for me and that I think are kind of universal. And for no extra charge other than the ads on YouTube. I know, I'm such a saint. First, identifying your language learning style is key. One thing to know is you don't learn your language just with your brain. Each student acquires and processes information differently depending on their culture, background, and life experiences. Some language learning studies have shown that we have a language learning style, which includes visual, auditory, verbal, and tactile. Visual language learners tend to learn a language best when the language is shown to them via images, graphs, and any and all visual helpers. Auditory and verbal learners prefer verbal and written input rather than visual one, and tactile learners require the whole body experience, sort of like when you're dissecting a frog. Figure which one you are and tailor your study method around that method. One great resource I can recommend for visual learners is story learning. Now, for those of you that don't know, I recently started learning Japanese. And let's just say, it's not the easiest language out there. One of the main things I've struggled with is the alien grammar. However, I was delighted to find out that the sponsor for this video was gonna be story learning. Now, story learning offers courses in 11 different languages, and they utilize a method of teaching you your desired language through, well, stories. As you read a story, you go over the vocabulary in that language and have the grammar from the story explained to you in simple terms. And as someone who's used a variety of different methods, apps, software, and textbooks, I can tell you this method is quite useful. So if you're someone who's like me and has used a variety of different apps and methods and doesn't want to spend thousands on private tutoring lessons, then story learning is for you. Now, you're not gonna get fluent off of story learning alone. However, it is a great resource to have, especially when it comes to explaining grammar, and especially if you're studying a language alone. And the courses on there are made by fellow YouTuber Ollie Richards, which both me and my fiance have watched for a long time. So I can wholeheartedly recommend his work. And if you're not interested in story learning, at least go check out his channel, because if you like this video, there's a chance you'll like his stuff as well. But for story learning, with my link in the description, you can get any of the 11 languages available for only $97 instead of $297. And that's for a limited time only. So go click the link in the description right now and get your language course today. Anyways, when learning a language, find a progressive source to learn your language from. This could be either a textbook, a digital or real-life course, or even an app, as long as it's not Duolingo. That green bird is a mess that's worthy of its own video. Either way, find something that can introduce you slowly and gradually into more and more of the key concepts of your key language and the vocab and grammar. While learning both Hungarian and Romanian, my preferred method was basically a textbook. A lot of the time, well, most of the time, they're written by a professional who usually is a professor of the subject, and they will explain grammar concepts in a very professional way, which you can also understand, and they'll know how to progress slowly so you don't get lost in the sauce. Alongside this, for each chapter, a textbook is going to provide you with a certain amount of vocab, so you kind of have like a base on at least the keywords that you should know per lesson. What's also cool about textbooks is they also provide you worksheets, so you have something to work on that you learned beforehand, such as grammar and other language concepts. If you're more of an audio learner, consider buying an audio textbook, or even an audio course, or even listening to a language podcast. Another great thing I've heard a lot of people use is basically recording themselves speaking a language and then listening back to it. This is in particular very useful if you're more of a verbal learner. Enrolling and attending a class of your desired language is also a good alternative, but again, self-study is crucial no matter which path you choose. Now, finding a course or a textbook will usually be the base of the process. However, just utilizing your primary source won't get the job done. Alongside this, you should utilize a variety of other aids to expand your grammar and vocab. For example, I am a visual learner, and one of the best ways I learn is through basically using flashcards. Basically, throughout my language learning process, I'd use apps such as Drops, 17-Minute Languages, and Anki to basically practice vocab and get it memorized. Essentially, seeing a word how it's written and having an image to associate with it was really beneficial to me. So throughout my language learning process, I would just be sitting on a public transport and autistically just going through my phone, basically doing flashcards. And this method is quite useful. And although it can get quite repetitive, it is quite efficient. When it comes to more grammar concepts, such as verbs and conjugation, which God knows Hungarian doesn't have enough of those, I'd basically go to a website such as conjugator.com and write down all the different conjugations that exist. And then each day, 20 to 30 minutes per day, I would then practice by basically writing down all the conjugations in my notebook. And to memorize it, I would basically use different colored pencils to write the endings of the words. So then my brain can kind of recognize the endings and I can more easily memorize it. Later on, I switched to using different apps to practice this. And if you just go to the App Store, I'm sure you can find the one for your desired language as well. To practice listening, a lot of the textbooks come with like audio CDs or QR codes which you can scan and which brings you to like a bunch of recorded audio for each lesson. So for my listening exercises, I would basically just do that for each lesson and do the listening exercises with the CD provided. And for pronunciation, I would just repeat what was being said on the audio recordings.
Sejtek. Volt valaha az árt intézetben? Sejtek. Mintha kaptárban lett volna? Sejtek.
It's not very glamorous, but if you're consistent, you will see results. So at my peak of learning Hungarian, I would spend learning Hungarian 2 hours a day, where in the beginning I would start off doing something in my textbook, and then I would spend time using flashcards to work on my vocabulary, and then for the rest of the lesson I would basically spend by autistically conjugating verbs so I could memorize them. And with this being said, it's important that you don't skimp out on consistency and practice. It isn't glamorous, and honestly, it can be quite boring at times, but With consistency and doing it over and over again, you will achieve results and you will memorize and learn your desired language. There aren't many ways around this, and if someone tells you, oh, learn this language with complete fun, they're kind of lying, because a lot of it is just pure grind. Now, there are some ways to go around this monotony. One of them is using the learning by teaching method, as said by Metatron Academy, who is also an awesome language learning resource that I also recommend. Also, don't be afraid to reach out and ask for help. In the modern day and age, it's never been easier to reach out to other fellow learners, especially via internet forums. Reddit basically has a ton of language learning subreddits with a bunch of natives at your easy disposal who want to help you learn your desired language. So don't be afraid to utilize that as well. If you're looking for something more personal, there's also a variety of websites you can use where you can get a private tutor for paid or free. Some I can recommend are italki and HelloTalk. Again, when I was in the prime of studying Hungarian, I would spend at least 1 hour each week talking to my tutor and basically practicing pronunciation and listening. And as we talk, she'd basically correct me in my grammar or pronunciation. So it is something that's very useful. If you can, speak as much as you can with the people who speak your desired language so you can practice it, and don't be afraid if you mess up. Messing up is just a part of the process and no one really cares but you. There are also a bunch of YouTube channels that provide great tips on learning a language and that also, teach your desired language. But as I stated in my previous videos on polyglots, be aware of certain polyglot channels. If they're promising to teach you something in a short time and achieve a high level such as fluency, they're probably trying to sell you something. Also, try and avoid Duolingo as much as you can. I know the app has marketed itself as a fun alternative way to learn a language, and personally I did use it for years. However, the quality has dropped tremendously ever since they went public, and a lot of the grammar and vocab is essentially recycled. They make the lessons very grindy and recycled. There is very little new material being utilized, and they made the app as grindy as possible, so you would basically buy premium. And even if you do use it and end up at the end of the course, eventually you will have to go to other resources to achieve fluency. So it's better to skip using Duolingo as a whole and just do basically other resources instead. You will move much faster, you will progress much faster, and you won't regret it, believe me.
We don't need no education.
Another thing to keep in mind is that the language learning process is never linear, and sometimes, unfortunately, you will hit a seemingly out of nowhere plateau, and everything that you once thought was simple won't make sense at all, and you'll even start to question if you even learned the language at all. This is normal, and no, you did not forget everything. Beginner gains are a thing, and when you start from zero, your gains are huge and motivating. But then comes the intermediate plateau, where you've already learned quite a lot of things, so the things that you are learning don't seem as great, and what used to seem easy now seems difficult, and progressing seems ever more so harder. Usually this plateau arises when you've used up most of your resources to their usefulness, and you've reached an intermediate level of your desired language, which although is frustrating, is something to be proud of. At this point, it's best to do several strategies to get the momentum back up. The first thing is to change the material you're learning your language from. Basically, this is your cue to go and get another textbook for a more intermediate level and continue learning from there. Another thing is to start consuming media in your desired language, which means read books, comics, watch movies, TV shows, cartoons, whatever, anything. One of the best resources for this is unironically Netflix. Netflix offers a lot of their original shows in a variety of different languages that are both dubbed and subbed. And if you can't find your desired language, by using a VPN and switching regions, you can most likely find what you're looking for. Basically, that's how I kept watching Hungarian shows while I was visiting my parents in the US. Although sometimes the dub and sub won't be in sync, it's still a great tool to basically practice listening and reading. So definitely a great source. And even in the beginner intermediate level, listening to someone else speak will seem as quite a huge task, be it they speak too fast or have too thick of an accent, and the only way to get used to this is just practicing, and practicing. So even if you don't understand the media that you're watching, even after years of learning, don't be discouraged, you just have to push through it. At this stage, I also recommend using a flashcard app, again, such as Anki, to basically write down all the new vocab that you learn. For example, when I watch movies or read books in Hungarian, I highlight all the new words that I learn and then I put them into my app. So each morning after I have my coffee, I basically do a bit of flashcards and adopt the new vocab that I learned previously. And unfortunately, a lot of the time throughout the intermediate plateau, it will seem like you're barely making any progress, but that's because you've made so much. And looking back at it a couple of months from this point, you will see all the progress that you've made. It's just not obvious on first glance. Again, it's just important to be consistent and practice. While on first glance learning a language can be quite a tremendous ordeal, it doesn't have to be. Just remember to use a variety of different sources, practice regularly, and motivate yourself properly, and you will achieve this in no time. And with using a variety of media, textbooks, and other study methods, you will be on the path to becoming fluent eventually. Anyways, let me know what languages are you learning, and which languages were the hardest for you to learn. And again, big thank you to Story Learning for sponsoring this video. Remember to check them out in the description down below. And again, big thank you to the members who support this channel. We would not be here where we are without them. If you want to be cool like them, become a member today and have your name right here. My name is Janos and you've watched Living Ironically in Europe.